Buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Across the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com, where you'll find everything. I mean, everything. Live stream, social media links, podcasts, the whole schmear out there at michaeldukeshow.com. Also broadcasting each and every day across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning and welcome to the program. It is, it's Tuesday, and sorry, I just read a comment. One of the people in the chat room just said, I need to cool my coffee so I can pour it into my eyes. Is it that bad? I mean, it's Tuesday, it's not Monday. Do you really need to pour your coffee into your eyes? Some days I feel that so much. But not today. Today is a new day. Today is Tuesday, and we are ready to go and rock and roll and do all our things. And man, so much good stuff. Tuesday means, well, for one thing, we're going to get into the weekly top three, which is presented by our friend Bard Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. He's going to be joining us this morning, and today we're going to cover the big three. Some topics include some people not understanding the depth of our fiscal problem, then where the budget is actually headed. And number three on the weekly top three is how Bert Stedman's version of SB 107 isn't about paying for a 50-50 PFD. It's about killing it. It's about burying it. And so we're going to talk those three things with Bard Keithley here in just a little bit. And we'll be covering all that and then some. Then in hour two, we'll have some recap, some more discussions. And we will continue on with Chris Story, the man from Houma, who will come in and give us our weekly life coaching lesson. I don't know what the mission's going to be today, but he's going to have something for us that will boost us and build us up, Buttercup. That's what build us up, Buttercup. So that's the program for today. Coming up tomorrow on the program, we'll have Mike Shower on and maybe one other. We are trying to get somebody from the finance committee on in the House, because the House has finally passed their budget over to the Senate, and we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens there. But that's the plan anyway, and then we'll see what goes on later on in the week. I have nothing for Thursday as of right this hot second, but we're working on it. Okay, so it's the news. That's the thing. We got just a couple headlines that I thought we'd dive into first and foremost and see what's going on. Interesting story from KTU. I don't know how many of you are last minute Charlies when it comes time to filing your taxes. I am pretty consistently a last minute guy in those kind of things. I think in part it has to do with my reticence to because taxation is theft, and I'm just like, "Argh." So it seems like I'm always waiting to the last minute to get the taxes in and do all that stuff, simply because it antagonizes me, I think, more than anything else. For those of you who are early birds, and the second you get your W-2s in from the previous year, you run right down and get them done. Well, you may want to go check in with your tax preparer or your tax professional, or if you do them yourself, you may want to file an amended tax return because the IRS issued an updated bulletin on Friday, last Friday, one business day before the taxes were due. They issued an updated bulletin in response to Alaska residents who had already filed their tax return because they are making the Alaska Energy Relief Payment, which was $662.19. That was the amount of the excuse me, of the energy relief payment. That portion of it would be tax exempt, would not be taxable. The total PFD payout was $3,284. $662.19 of that was not taxable. So if you've got a married couple, you're talking about $1,300 and change that was not a taxable income. And so if you didn't account for that, you may want to. The total taxable amount per dividend now, $2,621.81. So it can cause a shift. It can cause a shift. Maybe only a few bucks, maybe $100, maybe more, depending on what your income level is. But I mean, good to know that they are Johnny on the spot with that information. Just clarifying that you may want to go back to your tax preparer and discuss your next steps with that tax professional. That's what they said on Friday. They added that they may also issue further guidance about this issue, which, I mean, I don't know what kind of further guidance you could issue since you had to have everything in yesterday. But hey, woof, right? This story came out. This story came out late yesterday, about 4:00 in the afternoon yesterday on KTU's website, the Alaska News Source, that this was going on. Now, the original story is back in February. Apparently, they were clarifying it. I hadn't seen a thing about it, but apparently that was it. So they're trying to clarify the issue. Apparently, clear as mud. This is why they needed the $80 billion, to be able to make sure that they were clear in their communications with the public. Clear in their community. Surprisingly enough, the office of they had an audit from the OMB, or maybe it was the OIG's office. I can't remember. I was just reading the article yesterday from Reason Magazine, and they were talking about all these problems and all these mistakes that were being made by taxpayers as they were putting these things together. And the OIG's office, or whoever it was, said, you guys should really track this stuff because some of this is just because of the confusion of how complex the tax code is and all this other kind of stuff. And you guys should track it so that you can fix your processes. And the IRS said, no, thanks. We've got it covered. I mean, that was the literal response. Nah, we're good. That's why they needed $80 billion right there. That was the reason right there. Boy, I'm glad I don't live in Anchorage. They've snuck in a new resolution that's going to be heard tonight. It's a late on the table item, which means it's a last minute addition to the Assembly's agenda. Those are supposed to be for matters that simply cannot wait to be included on the agenda in a timely manner. The previous Assembly chair people have said that the late on the table items must have a compelling reason for being put on the agenda so late. This one is not so, I guess, compelling. It's a resolution that talks about, it cracks down on misinformation, disinformation, or what they consider to be hateful speech in the assembly chambers during public testimony. This just looks like a way to try and muzzle people for saying things that you don't agree with. The resolution, which is offered by Robin Dern, who's the temporary assembly member who the assembly appointed to fill out the final weeks of Rep. Jamie Allard's term in office, gives the assembly cover to label people who disagree with assembly members as spreading disinformation, misinformation, or dangerous conspiracies. Any discussion on electoral misconduct or anything else, this basically just gives them carte blanche to shut people down. I mean, wow. Just wow. I mean, it's the cornerstone of, free speech is like the cornerstone of our entire way of life. And these people definitely don't want your speech to be free. They want to control it. So it's a little crazy. We'll see what happens, but the ordinance is an ordinance of the Anchorage Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code to recognize the decision-making authority of the Assembly with respect to uncodified mayoral directives, policies, and procedures, and other uncodified policies and administrative practices as applied to the legislative branch. That's kind of what I'm just glad I don't live in Anchorage. I'm just glad. And if you needed another reason why you, again, should consider pulling your kids out of public school and putting them in some other kind of learning program, the public testimony for HB 105, which was held on Thursday night, had just a tremendous amount of clogged phone lines with teachers who testified that they have the right and duty to keep matters secret between parents and their kids, to keep them the kids from their parents. They insisted that minors have the right to change their names at schools without their parents knowing about it, that boys with the boy part should be allowed to use female bathrooms and locker rooms without their parent knowing about it. They insist, they basically, once kids put their children in school, you have to trust the teachers to have confidential talks with the children, and no matter whatever the subject is, it's all parents just shouldn't know. That's what this testimony was all about, over and over and over again. And only about 36 Alaskans spoke out in favor of the parental rights in education, and a flood of teachers, LGBTQ advocates, and parents of transgenders were taking over the phone lines. There were just dozens and dozens and dozens of them. Like I said, at some point, I just throw my hands up in the air and go, nope, not going to have that fight anymore. Not going to have that fight. It's just, they're better organized. They're better put together. They've got the kumbaya spirit. That's all that's happening right there. You can still fight the fight. I'm just not going to have my kids in the crossfire while you do it. All right, we got to go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll return to Brad Keithley right after this.
What is that?
Common sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show. Radio.
Yeah, that's not happening in my neck of the woods. Ooh, baby. Ooh, baby. Imagine how much you would hate tax day if Alaska had an income taxes, Donna. This is true. I'm still going to be resistant to it no matter what happens. All right, let me go back over here. Let's see. I'm just still going through this. Can't afford to spend time on this nonsense. And yet he's here every day. All right. Let's see. What a bunch of dictators. What? I don't know. My husband got shut down on the Fairbanks North Scarborough School Board when he was reading a book from the school library, says Jennifer. Yeah, exactly. Teachers generally can be trusted. General administrators, not so much. The higher up the food chain you go, the less worthy. Okay, teachers and say, all right. He was a board member. He was a board member when he was reading a book from the school library and he got shut down, says Jennifer. Phew, dang. Is the deadline today? I swear I walked around all day yesterday and thought it was yesterday. So, hey, good for us. Good for us if it was today. Okay. I think we got everything all squared away. I say, since I've got nothing else to talk about this morning, let's just go over to Brad. Let's let Brad fill the silence. We'll let Brad fill the silence of everything. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Michael. I'm doing great today. How about you? Well, I already know how you're doing.
I'm doing fine.
I've got the answer. Yes, today is filing day.
Okay.
And it's because the 17th, which you would normally think would be it first day after the weekend, the filing day can't be on a day on which there is a federal holiday. And the District of Columbia on the 17th observes Emancipation Day. And because of that, the filing day got moved to the 18th because the District of Columbia is a federal enclave.
Yeah, because originally it was the 17th, right? I mean, I saw the notation a while back that it was on the 7th. So they must have changed it afterward. I don't know. Who knows? They keep changing the rules on me, Brad. I'm trying to comply, but they just can't. Whatever.
Well, I was curious about that myself, so I dug into it.
You dug into it and figured it out. All right. I just, I'm just shaking my head. This Anchorage you live in Anchorage. I mean, do you watch what's going on with this assembly? Do you what are your thoughts on something like this when they're like, okay, now we're going to police the speech. Now we're going to, you said something that I don't agree with and you criticized me. How dare you criticize me? That just seems to be some pretty thin skin going on around there.
I agree, but we keep electing an assembly here that is that does that sort of thing. So, I mean, personally, I would prefer that we not go that direction. But we do have a democracy, so we keep electing assembly members that engage in that sort of activity. I
guess that's what the majority of Anchoragites want. Is they're happy with it. I mean, I keep watching the returns from these things and I go, okay. I mean, I'm glad I don't live down in Anchorage directly because my property tax is not contributing to that madness.
Yeah, the problem is we've become way polarized. I mean, I don't have any great insights on the municipal government, but we've become way polarized, right? You either vote extreme left or you vote extreme right, and so we've got people who are being given not great choices in terms of which way you go. And
well, I mean, that's the thing. The people in the middle, I think, a lot of times have just thrown their hands up in the air and walked away and be like, I'm not participating in this madness anymore. So, all right, well, here we go. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Please like and share, like and follow. Let's get it done. Here we go. The Michael Luke Show. Well, we continue now this morning, the weekly top three, the big three items on the agenda from Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. He joins us every day, obviously an organization dedicated to sustainable budgets. That's what It's kind of self-explanatory, Brad. Good job on naming it. That was a great deal. He is the founder and director, and every week we come in to talk about three big items. Good morning, Brad. How you doing, my friend?
Michael, I'm doing great today. How about you?
No complaints this morning. No complaints. Nobody listens anyway. So let's get started here. It's true, right? I mean, it's true. Nobody really cares.
Oh, the kids listen. Your dog listens.
My dog listens. Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, let's start off here in the weekly top three. We got a lot to cover. I don't know if we're going to be able to make it an hour. I might have to nail you down and get you into hour two, but let's see. First thing is that nobody really understands the problem. Nobody really seems, apparently, from what we're seeing in the headlines and everything else, some just not understanding the depth of the fiscal problem. Let's get started. Let's get started on that.
Well, in the Anchorage Daily News, we talked about Matt Berman, ICER professor Matt Berman's piece last week, op-ed piece where he talked about his proposed solution to the fiscal problems. And I think I think Matt has a great solution. I wrote about it on Friday in the Alaska Landmine column. But in response to that, Al Belay, who I know and respect generally, wrote an op-ed that said, that was headlined, "An even better way to balance Alaska's budget." And it's an idea. His idea is one that's been bouncing around a lot. Others have expressed it as well, and that is to means test or needs test the PFD, that the PFD would not be given to everyone. It would only be given to those that fall below a certain category. The people, or a certain income level, the people that believe in that, I think have the impression that if the top 20%, for example, just gave up their PFD, or the top 25% would give up their PFD, it'd all be over. That'd satisfy the deficit, and everybody could have their PFD, and we'd go along fat and happy. That's not true. That's not even close to being true. I did a piece a while back that I went back and took the methodology, updated the numbers, and here's what we're facing. We're facing over the next 10 years a deficit, an annual average deficit over the next 10 years of roughly $2 billion or $2 billion a year. That's 35% of spending. 35% of the spending levels are going to have to be covered by something else. They're going to be in deficit. Put another way, traditional revenues are only sufficient to cover 65% of spending. We're going to have to come up with 35%. If we entirely eliminated the PFD to the top 25% using IRS data, if we entirely eliminated the PFDs to the top 20%, that would only raise $900 million, 45% of the deficit. We'd still have 55% of the deficit remaining, even if we eliminated PFDs entirely to the top 25%. Just said, okay, we're only going to focus PFDs on middle and lower income Alaska families. Top 25%, no PFDs. That only covers 45% of the deficit. We'd still have roughly $1.1 billion out of the $2 billion of deficit left to go. That means we would have to cut, if we're going down that road and we're gonna eliminate the PFD to the top 25%. We would still have to cut 60% of the PFD, of the statutory PFD, to the remaining 75% to fill the deficit. There wouldn't even remotely be enough remaining of the PFD after closing the deficit to fund the full PFD for the remaining 75%. It would only be 60%. The other way to look at it is how many could we fully fund the PFD to if we just eliminated the PFD for everybody else, eliminated the deficit by using PFD elimination for everybody else. How many could get the full PFD after we did that? And we could pay the full PFD only to the bottom 140,000, which is roughly the bottom 35% of Alaska families or Alaskans, the bottom. So that means to pay off the deficit using this means testing approach. If the means testing approach would mean we're going to pay the full PFD to somebody, we're just going to eliminate it for everybody else, and only pay it to those below a certain level. We'd have to eliminate it to 65% of Alaska families in order to pay the full PFD to the remaining 35%. Not only would the top 25%, top 20% have to contribute theirs, not only would the top 25% have to contribute theirs, the top 65% middle income Alaska families would have to have the elimination, would have to face the elimination of the PFD in order to pay a full PFD to the remaining 35% of Alaska families. We're facing, the purpose of these numbers is we're facing some huge deficits going forward. I mean, 35% of the budget is going to be in deficit, huge deficits going forward. And people think we can get away with, oh, we'll just eliminate the PFD to the top 20%, or we'll eliminate the PFD to the top 25%, or we'll eliminate the PFD to the top 50%. It's just the numbers are just too staggering to be able to do that.
Yeah, numbers still don't work. I thought he tipped his hand in this piece, which I've posted up in the chat room, this opinion piece from Al Balea. I thought he tipped his hand at the very end when he says, whatever funds are freed up from this change can be used for critical public services and education, acting like this will be extra free money. That's what I mean. Right? When you read it that way, you're like, all the money freed up from this can be spent on other things. And I'm like, wait a second, we've got a huge deficit and you want to spend it on other things? This would just take up a portion of the, I mean, but this is the feel. It's not your money. It's the government's money. We should do with it as we want. Blah, 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 blah. There you go.
Yeah, it's people just don't have a good feel for the numbers. I mean, they think so. Elise Galvin's proposal that she presented last night to House Ways and Means. We talked about it last week, but it's another example of not having a good feel for the numbers. Her proposal is an income tax, 2% flat tax on incomes above $200,000. So the first $200,000 is exempt. Income above $200,000 will be subject to a flat tax, and then the remainder would be raised, or the remainder of her proposal would be raised through a head tax, a $20 head tax. That barely scratches the surface. We're facing $2 billion deficits. Her proposal raises maybe $150 million. And if you look at just the income, because the head tax proposal is just another way of recharacterizing PFD cuts. It doesn't actually add any revenue. You're going to have to cut PFDs deeply in order to balance the budget, even with her proposal. And so you're just really recharacterizing $20 of the PFD cut as a head tax as opposed to a PFD cut. So skip that. The proposed income tax that she's got raises, $75 million, somewhere between $75 million and $100 million, depending upon how many out-of-state residents we have with income above $200,000. But at most, it raises $100 million against a deficit of $2 billion. And she and those who are backing it and those who are saying, well, it's a major step forward, are saying, this is really a solid proposal. No, it's not. It's, as we called it last week, it's a fig leaf. It is. You don't have, if you think that's a solid proposal on the way forward, you don't have a good grasp on the numbers that we're facing, the deficits we're facing going forward, because it's a drop in the bucket. It's $100 million out of a $2 billion annual deficit that we're facing going forward. Same thing with Al Balea's. It's a real proposal. By gosh, the top 20% or the top 20% just ought to give up their PFDs. Let's focus it on the remainder of Alaska families. And as you say, we'll have a little bit left over. His concept is we'll have a little bit left over. No, you won't. I mean, if the deficit's $2 billion, if the top 25%, every last one of them gives up their PFD, their full PFD, that only raises $900 million. We still got $1.1 billion to go. And people just don't have, I mean, they don't have a grasp on how deep a hole we've dug ourselves into.
Right. Well, and they're not thinking long term. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of that old analogy about, triage, and you stumble in with a bleeding femoral artery and the gal's like, let me put a Band-Aid on that. That'll be fine. Don't worry about that. And that's what it feels like. I mean, it just feels like, do you guys not understand the depth of what we're talking about here? And again, the reaction of Bolea to say, oh, all this, with all the funds we freed up, we'll be able to use that on critical public services and everything. It's going to suck up all the money in the room. Are you kidding me?
And you know what's going to happen? Let's say just for a moment, let's say we adopted it. And so we've got 35% of Alaska, the remaining 35% of the Alaska families getting the full PFD. How long is it going to be until somebody says, well, that's just welfare. We need to cut the welfare. And so, they don't need all that. So we'll just take, 5,000 here, 5,000 there. And how long is that going to last? I mean, once you've converted the PFD, which is a share, let's go back to the fundamentals. It is a share of Alaska's wealth for every man will convert the PFD into a welfare payment, which is basically what this proposal is. How long do you think it's going to last until people just start, cutting it down and cutting it down and cutting it down even further until it's gone? It's just, it's a step on the road of eliminating the PFD through another means. And, I just prefer somebody come in my face and say, I just want to wipe out the PFD and argue about that, as opposed to this nickel and dime approach of, well, we'll eliminate it to the top 25%. Well, then that's not going to work. We'll eliminate it to the top 50%. Well, that's not going to work. We'll eliminate it to the top 65%. Well, we need more money. So now we're just going to sort of start nickel and diming it down from there. And I just, let's just have the debate. Let's finalize the debate. Let's just not go down the road of nickel and diming.
So, serious question. Now that you're looking at this and you're seeing all these numbers, and you've been deep diving on all this and everything else, 35% deficit for all this time. So, I mean, do you think that at some point they're going to come to realize that they're going to have to make cuts? I mean, because, you and I have talked about there being no political will to make cuts, but when you start talking about a 35% deficit, projected in the future, and even if they took all of the PFD, that only lasts for a year or two before just the generation and size of government, as it increases every year, is going to push us beyond that. Does anybody start to acknowledge that we have to start cutting? I mean, is that even on the horizon?
Michael, over the last decade plus that I've been at this, I've come to the realization and conviction that the only way we're going to ever get people to push back on spending is if all Alaskans have to deal with it, if they all are going to suffer from it, if they all have to contribute to fill the gap. The problem with the PFD, the problem with using the PFD to fill it, as we've done since 2016, is only middle and lower income Alaska families are contributing. None of the top 20% are contributing a trivial share, sort of like the cost of a Starbucks a day, are contributing a trivial share toward the cost of government. And they don't care about that. So, and they're the ones who are in the forefront of more spending and more spending and more spending, because they don't have to pay for it. They're shoving it down on middle and lower income Alaska families. The only way we're going to get pushback, the only way we're going to start getting spending under control, is if all Alaska families, including the top 20%, including the business leaders, including the people who hire the lobbyists, including as Ben Carpenter put it on the show a couple of weeks ago, including the chambers of commerce and the trade associations, if they have to start contributing, if their members have to start contributing, if their leadership has to start contributing, then they're going to become concerned about spending. But as long as we allow use a mechanism that shoves the cost down to middle and lower income Alaska families, unless the top 20% off, we're never going to get spending under control. I mean, Bolea, who's clearly in the top 20%, is telling you what their attitude is. I can do away with. I don't worry about my PFD. Take my PFD, but don't tax me. But take my PFD. That's fine. We'd have to take the PFD of 65% of Alaska families to fill the budget as it is. As long as we can keep shoving it down, nobody's going to worry about spending. or there's not going to be enough people. There's not going to be critical mass. There's not going to be enough lobbyists worrying about spending.
Well, that was number one. We're out of time completely here. Number two, give me a 20-second tease here. I mean, where is the budget headed?
Well, so the House finally passed the budget last night, but even the House members are saying, well, it's just a starting point for negotiations. So the true answer is nobody knows where the budget's going, but we're going to talk about some of the parameters around the budget in the second segment.
All right, we're going to be back. Bard Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top three. Number one's done. We're on to number two. We may bleed over into the next hour. I want to get to all of these in depth because I think they're important. We're going to continue. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more right after this.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Bard Keithley, our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. I think Chris is kind of echoing what I said earlier. If Brad is complaining about how deep the hole has gotten, does that mean he's ready to talk about cuts again? I don't know, as Brad never really stopped talking about cuts except for the feasibility of it. I mean, Brad and if you listen to this program since 2014, Brad and I have been hammering on cuts. We hammered on cuts for the first 5 years. Specifically, we were talking about you've got to get it down to what the ICER said was, first it was 4.1 and then it was 4.0, then it was $3.9 billion as a base to be able to keep it sustainable. And everybody was like, oh yeah, we can do that. And then blew right past it. And at some point, kind of both Brad and I realized there is no political will to fix any of that. It's like the wheels have got to come off the bus before anybody acknowledges that the spending is not there. But I still want to see cuts, but I just, where's the backup for it, Brad?
Well, it's structure, Michael. I take a little offense at people who make that comment. I wrote my first op-ed on spending cuts in 2012 in the Anchorage Daily News. And I said, we need to start talking about cuts. Now, this is at the same time that Bill Stoltz, former Senator Bill Stoltz and others in the Valley were still pressing for, the Mat-Su rail extension and all sorts of spending out in the Mat-Su. It's the same time we were building the Mat-Su campus. And the Performing Arts Center out in the Mat-Su. I was saying we need spending cuts, and I got raked over the coals for that. Oh, we don't need to worry about spending cuts. We got plenty of money. Stop complaining about it. And I've kept that theme throughout the subsequent decade. But here's the problem: there is not a structure in place. The fiscal structure is not in place to push for cuts. The reason is the people who are pushing for spending, the top 20%, don't have to pay for it. They can push that spending off on somebody else, push the revenues that are needed to pay for it off on somebody else by using PFD cuts and pushing it to middle and lower income Alaska families. The only way we're going to get spending under control is to change the fiscal structure so that the top 20% have to pay for it as well. Yes, I want cuts. Yes, I've wanted cuts since 2012. Yes, I wanted cuts throughout the entire 2010s. Yes, I've wanted cuts throughout the 2020s. But you have to have a fiscal structure in place that creates the imperative for all Alaskans to engage in trying to push back and trying to get cuts. And the fiscal structure we've created is just that the bottom 80% end up paying for it. The top 20% get free government. You talk about free rides die hard. What's really going on here is the top 20% don't want to pay for government. They've had a free ride throughout Alaska's history. Since we undid the income tax in the early 1980s, they've had a free ride from there on throughout Alaska's history, and they don't want to stop their free ride. They just and to not stop their free ride. They want Alaska to be like the lower 48. They want AstroTurf baseball or football fields. We went through that phase. They want a great government. They want a big government. They want their teachers to be happy. They want everybody to be happy, but they don't want to pay for it.
Right.
And that's the fiscal structure we've got in place. And until we replace that fiscal structure and create an incentive in the top 20% to push back on spending, we're not going to get spending cuts. So yes, I want cuts. And the way I'm going about cuts is to change the fiscal structure so that we create an incentive in all Alaskans to push for those cuts. I've got great ideas. Others have great ideas on where those cuts can be made. But until we have a fiscal structure in place so that the leaders of the chambers of commerce and the leaders of the other trade groups and the leader and the top 20% generally, the people that hire the lobbyists, until they have an incentive to get in the game and push for cuts also, we're not going to get them. So my way of pushing for cuts is to get the top 20% in the game, to get those people who are controlling spending in the game of pushing back on spending.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is our guest. And yes, we have talked about oil. Man, there's broken records. We have talked about oil. That's part of the fiscal plan. I mean, part of the overall long-term fiscal plan that's been put forward by the Fiscal Policy Working Group includes a tax. Where they're talking about a sales tax, which I know is more regressive and not the preferred plan that Brad's talked about. They talk about more oil taxation. They talk about some cuts. They talk about it all. A spending cap, protecting the PFD, all of those things. We have talked about all of those things. So you could come back to that. You just hold that thought and come back to that. The Michael Dukes Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like and share, like and follow, subscribe and ring the bell on YouTube. Do all that stuff. Let's get back to it. Here we go. Common Sense Radio. Let's do it. All right, we're continuing the Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. And we're in the weekly top 3. Number 2, where is the budget going? Last night, some stuff happened. What does it mean from here, though? Brad, where are we at?
So the House passed a budget last night, $600 million in deficit based upon the spring revenue forecast, maybe a little bit less than that based upon current oil prices, but current oil prices are headed back down this morning. So gosh only knows where we're going to end up. $600 million in deficit. Goes to the Senate. The Senate has, with the supermajority, the 17 have said they want no deficit. And the way that they propose to get the budget back in balance is to close the deficit through additional PFD cuts. The House was at POMB 50-50, already down from the statutory levels. The Senate has said that they propose to get a balanced budget through additional PFD cuts. And actually, the PFD level they're talking about would give them some additional revenue that they want to spend on additional K through 12 spending. So there's, we're at a very contentious polar opposite situation. House with a big deficit, but with a POMB 50-50 PFD. Senate saying they want an even bigger budget, but they don't want a deficit, and they're just going to tax the PFD, tax middle and lower income Alaska families to bring it into balance. The House had held up on theirs for a number of reasons. One is the tricks that Bert Stedman's known for pulling at the end of the session, where the Senate gets the House operating budget. Thank you very much. And the Senate then holds the capital budget, combines the two together and sends it back sort of in a take it or leave it, holds it till the end of the session, till they're right up against 120 days. And then sits there and sends it back right at the end in what's called a turducken, I think, budget, which combines the capital budget and the operating budget in one big budget. And then the Senate adjourns and goes home and leaves the House with either a take it or leave it proposition, to either take what the Senate's done shut down government down because you won't have a budget. So the House, one of the reasons that the House had held up was because of that concern the Senate might do it. I understand piecing it together that Burt said he won't do that this year, and so the House,
Right.
That's because he's got something else in mind, in my idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's funny. The landmine in his piece talks about this and explains it. It says House leaders want to make sure that the Senate will send them the capital budget once the House passes the operating budget. The House majority fears that if the Senate holds all the appropriations bills, they could send the House a turducken, the capital, supplemental, and operating budgets all merged into one document, and force the House to take a yes or no vote on all three budgets at once, preventing them from writing their own capital budget that they could be merged with the Senate version. Senate leadership has said that they have no plans to cook up a turducken, but there is no great deal of trust between the leaders of the two chambers. I mean, because again, past performance is indicative of future results. We've seen this kind of chicanery and shenanigans from Stedman and company before. They held hostage the KGB road project. They held hostage, previous budgets. Like you said, they just throw something together, walk away and adjourn and say, see ya, it's in your lap now. You've got to deal with it because, I mean, he's a bully. That's what he is. He's a political bully getting his way, doing what he thinks is best and screw everybody else. So yeah, there's no real, there's not a lot of trust going on right now between the two chambers.
Yeah. So, and even if the Senate, even if the Senate follows procedure, passes the capital budget, passes it over to the House, so the House can do whatever they want to do on the capital budget, and even if you do to go to conference, it's not clear where conference is going to end up because the Senate is pretty embedded on using PFD cuts, using taxes on middle and lower income Alaska families to pay for current and expanded government. The House really doesn't have an answer to that. It's just we don't want to tax middle and lower income Alaska families for it, but we don't have any other revenue ideas. We're not passing along any other revenue ideas, so we just got a $600 million hole in the budget that we're passing along, which isn't much better than the Senate's proposal to tax middle and lower income Alaska families. So you've got totally bad solutions on both sides, and no real clear path to get to the middle. The one person I haven't mentioned in this entire discussion is the governor.
Right.
The governor, is like
he's kind of the wild card in this, right? I mean, he's kind of like nobody's really sure what he's going to do, but he has the power to veto a lot of stuff, but he's not talking to anybody.
Right. I mean, it's like he's like on permanent vacation, and you elect a governor to be a leader, right? To lead the state, and this one's decided he's going to lead the state in absentia. So you got the Senate fighting on one side, you got the House fighting on one side, the governor not giving any guidance. I mean, the governor could say, look, you don't have a POMB 50-50 PFD, and I'm going to veto the full thing, send it back, start over. I mean, at a federal level, you have veto messages that come out of the executive and sort of guide the legislature in keep them between some ditches on what they're doing. Here, the governor's not done that, and so we've got a situation in which the Senate's just going to huff and puff and say we're going to demand what we're going to demand. The House is going to say we're going to demand what we're going to demand, but we don't have any proposal on how to fill the hole, the $600 million hole we've created. And you're going to have this standoff, and the governor's just going to sort of be humming around someplace, and maybe come in at the end, maybe not come in at the end. So the answer is nobody knows I don't think anybody knows where the budget's going. The Senate certainly has procedural. I mean, Bert's a procedural master, has procedural thoughts about how they might manage to get their way. The House, I'm not quite sure that they have thought through all the procedures about how they get their way, but they seem to be committed on a POMB 50-50 PFD at least, and where it lands, nobody knows. I would prefer the governor to step in and sort of set some boundaries and sort of say, look,
I mean, he should give him a fair heads up to say, instead of forcing him to pass the budget, get it onto his desk, and then veto everything. He should, like you said, line out to say, if you do this, this, and this, I'm going to veto it. So you might as well save yourself a lot of time and just make the decision now. This is a lack of leadership from the governor. Let me ask you one question here. Sarah Vance is quoted on the House budget talking about this, and I thought she brought up an interesting point. She says, you're not the only ones pinching your noses in reference to voting for the budget. She said about the planned draw from the CBR and everything else. She's opposed that in the past, but she said she would support using savings in the short term to balance the budget as a long-term fiscal plan continues, which is what the Fiscal Policy Working Group said. It's going to take a couple of years. You're going to have to live on some savings and do some things that you're not going to be happy with, but it's a compromise. What do you say to that?
Well, it's okay, except I've heard it for 10 years. I mean, I've heard it for, I remember one great episode somewhere in the mid 20-teens where, Lyman said, just pass the budget this year. We'll do $300 million in spending cuts next year. I promise, just pass the budget this year. $300 million evaporated. I mean, fool me once, fool me 20 times. Maybe I get a little bit skeptical about these sorts of things. We're getting down to the point. We are getting down to the point where we have to have a fiscal plan of some sort, even if in the end it's going to be extreme PFD cuts, because we're almost out of savings. And
Right.
and to some degree, I mean, the Machiavelli could say, yeah, drain savings more because that moves us closer to the I'll fall off the fiscal cliff date or fall off the cliff date. But I've heard it before. And
Right.
and the concern is, yeah, it's just a way of sort of rationalizing doing it one more time, and then I'll make up a new excuse next year for doing it again.
I had to laugh because you just said you remembered an episode from, it's like you're watching the best, telenovela in the world. I remember an episode from back in the 20-teens. It's like, is it a comedy, Brad? Is it a tragedy? What are you watching? I mean, that's what it is. All right.
It's something. It's something.
It's a tragic comedy at this point. You got to laugh because otherwise you'd weep uncontrollably. We got less than 60 seconds. So can you hang out with us and do number 3? I really want to talk about number 3 on the other side.
Sure.
All right. So we're going to hold the line here. Brad Keithley is our guest. We're going to come back and talk about number 3, which is HB 107, which is the 75-25 Lyman Hoffman discussion. But Bert Stedman may have other plans. I think you could probably guess where those plans are going. The new episode is going to drop in just a few minutes. That's what it is. We're going to come back. The Michael Duke Show continues. It is your home for common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Don't forget, you can come and join us out on Facebook if you want to be with us and talk with us during the break. We will continue with more in just a moment. Go to facebook.com/Michael Duke Show/live. And we will continue on the other side. Okay. In this episode of As the World Churns, the fiscal whatever. All right, so before we came back to the last segment, we were talking about this whole thing on oil and all this other stuff and taxes. And Brad said, "Let me tell you something," and then he got dinged. So, Brad, feel free to tell me something here. I kind of want to know where you're at this.
It's the same thing as everybody else. It's the same thing as Al Bollet. It's the same thing as, I mean, the people who are talking about oil. Oil is the solution. It's the same thing as Al Bollet. It's the same thing as Elise Galvin. Oil is a contributor. It's $400-500 million. Let's say we even get $600 million, although I think we're putting investment levels at risk at that point. But let's say we get $600 million. The deficit is $2 billion. $2 billion. Get that in your brain. $2 billion. We're not going to close it just from oil. Oil is a contribution to that. We're not going to close it just from Elise Galvin's 2% tax on, people on incomes above $200,000. We're not going to close it from that. We're not going to close it from a sales tax alone. It's going to take a bunch of different things. It's going to take some spending cuts in there, but you've got to motivate people, the people who have the power, who have the lobbyists, who run the trade groups. You got to motivate them to get in there for spending cuts, not say what they're doing now. Oh, we need more spending. I don't have to pay for it. So, hey, we need more spending. It's going to take a bunch of things. Don't continue to whine about, oh, it's oil. We're going to get it all. It's not. The deficit is too big. Get $2 billion in your mind. Okay. And tell me how you're going to build a package that closes to $2 billion and then it's worth listening. But just whining about her $75 to $100 million, income tax. Oh, I've got a solution. Ben talking about a $700 million, $800 million sales tax, but then taking $300 million away or more with a corporate income tax reduction. That's not it. That's not going to solve it. Sales tax isn't going to solve it because it's regressive. It's not going to ding the top 20% enough. You've got to get in there and put a bunch of things together that create incentives, create revenues, but also create incentives for people to stop additional spending and, in fact, start to move back on spending. And all of those things are great contributors, but don't whine at me and say, oh, oil's going to solve it all. You just don't talk about oil.
Right.
Oil's not going to solve it all.
Well, I mean, even if you went with Wilikowski's, his pie in the sky number of there's $1.2 billion left on the table. It's a $2 billion deficit. How does 1.2? I mean, this is, again, it's got to be a holistic approach, right? It's got to be all of this is what the FPW said. It's got to be holistic. It's got to be, cuts. It's got to be oil. It's got to be a taxation. It's got to be protecting the PFD. It's got to be a spending cap. It's got to be all those things. Or if you just do one, we're going to be right back here next year.
Yeah, exactly right. And it's got to be, part of it's got to be some PFD cuts. I wish it wasn't because it's aggressive. It hits middle and lower income Alaska families. It's the worst option for the overall Alaska economy. I wish we didn't have to do PFD cuts, but part of it has to be PFD cuts because we've got way too big a deficit to put entirely on the backs of any one segment, either all Alaska families through a tax, through a flat tax, either the oil companies entirely, everything. We got to use all the pieces to bring this together. The fiscal policy working group was exactly right in reaching that solution. And I'm just coming off income tax is the solution. Look at the lease. Oh, give me a break. Raises maybe $100 million. Give me a break.
110 million. That's what Donna posted earlier. The numbers say $110 million.
Not the income tax component. The income tax component is less than that.
Well, that's probably with the head tax at that point.
The head tax that is nothing more than a retitling of a portion of the PFD cut. People in their words that you've got to start with the concept that it's $2 billion. It's 35% of the budget that we've got to close and work from there. $2 billion. Work from there. Fill in the $2 billion hole.
Yeah, it's some crazy stuff that there's any one solution out there at this point that's going to fix it. It's gotten so large. There's no one problem that's going to fix it. And I mean, that's why, quite honestly, I mean, again, the 50-50, we talked about being the 50-50 PFD. That is a cut. And that's the cut you're talking about, right? I mean, because the statutory PFD is significantly higher, but the 50-50 is the original vision. And that's the cut you're talking about.
Right. So it's a $700 million cut over the annual average cut over the next 10 years. I mean, it's a huge piece of this. If you stomp on your feet and say we got to keep the statutory PFD, fine, find another $700 million someplace. You've already maxed out on oil. You've already maxed out on whatever you can burden Alaska families from an income tax. You've already maxed out all the other stuff. Now go find $700 million more that you're gonna do. So It's the numbers are huge, and people who you come to it. I mean, it's sort of like the old what's the old story of feeling this part of the cow and saying it's a pig, or feeling that part of the
Right.
cow and
The elephant,
it's
right? Right. Yeah.
elephant. Thank you. Yeah. Big
Exactly.
cow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Big cow.
it's sort of people people who are picking one little thing and saying, oh, that's the solution. It's sort of like that old story of touching the elephant and thinking it's something entirely different. It is the whole elephant. We've got to swallow. We got to come up and with enough things to get to the whole elephant.
Hold the line. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Oh, buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Good morning and welcome to the program. Hour 2 continues. Now, normally by this time we finished up with our weekly top 3 with Bard Keithley, but we got so deep into the muck on this, the quagmire, that we decided to ask Brad to stay over because we hadn't even gotten to number 3, which I was really looking forward to. Number 3 on the weekly top 3 is how SB 107 isn't going to fix the problem. The SB 107 is Lyman Hoffman's bill. It's the refiguring. It's a new PFD formula, 25-75. So government gets 75% of it, but that really wasn't enough. Bert Stedman actually wanted to stuff some other stuff into that. And Bert Stedman's vision of SB 107 is not what you think it is. Brad, I give it to you for the third of the weekly top 3. Take it away, my friend.
So there at airtime, there weren't any articles on this particular subject. So I'm gonna talk about it, sort of fill in some blanks from yesterday for people. Yesterday, Senate Finance held one of its hearings on SB 107, which is the committee bill to solve the PFD issue, permanently solve the PFD issue. And the proposal is to cut to POMV 25-75, and divert that money, 75% of the POMV to government, but to include a provision that allows you to claw back to 50-50 to POMV 50-50 if the legislature adopts certain revenue measures that offset that portion of the PFD cut. You can claw your way back, work your way back to POMV 50-50. And while the bill, SB 107, is a committee bill, it's been Lyman's proposal to sort of to include provisions to claw your way back to POMV 50-50, which presumably, Ben Carpenter's Ways and Means Committee is working on ways to do that. So it's not that unrealistic. The cost of clawing your way back, the difference between POMV 25-75 and POMV 50-50 over the next 10 years is about $1 billion. So you would need to raise, if all you're really trying to do is offset the drop in the revenues, or the difference in the revenues, all you really need to do is have that clawback of $1 billion. Bert yesterday, God love him, Bert yesterday amended Lyman's proposal for that clawback to both shorten the time, which makes it much less realistic that you're gonna get those clawbacks, which is Bert's intent, to make it unrealistic you're going to get the clawbacks, but also to say that you had to do 2 things to get the clawback. One, you had to raise $1.3 billion in new revenues, not just the billion difference between 25.75, but you have to raise $1.3 billion in new revenues to get the clawback. And there's no gradual clawback. It's either 25% or it's 50%, right? So you have to raise $1.3 billion to trigger the clawback. And you have to increase the SBR from its current roughly $2 billion to 3.5, 375, somewhere in that neighborhood. An additional $1 billion plus in surplus by this very shortened date, by the date that the trigger would operate in order to get it. So not only do you have to raise more revenues than is necessary to cover the clawback, you have to raise even more revenues above that to generate the surplus to build in the and hope to hell nobody spends that surplus while you're doing it, to build the surplus another $1 billion or $1.5 billion or $1.75 billion to get the clawback. Bert's proposal is essentially to put a poison pill in and make sure it never happens. And to have the fig leaf of saying, oh, well, we said, if you want to go back to POMV 50, we gave you a path to do it.
Right.
But
we gave you an out.
Yeah, but it's a totally unrealistic path. Now, here's the deal. Here's the thing that just really triggered me yesterday. Pens flying, all that sort of stuff. Here's the vote on the POMV 2575 with Bert's clawback. Here's the vote in support. It was a 4-3 passage in Senate Finance. Stedman, Bishop, and Merrick, Eagle Rivers, Merrick. Okay, you sort of figure those three are going to be together.
Right.
That's three. Those in opposition are Wilson, Hoffman, and Olson, because they believe the clawback is way the hell beyond what it needs to be. The time frame is too short. You're piling all this junk on just really to kill it, and they voted against piling the junk on. Wilson, Hoffman, and Olson against. The fourth vote, the deciding vote in favor of doing it this way, Jesse Keel. Let's see, where have we heard of Jesse Keel? Oh, he was on the fiscal policy working group,
right?
That said everything has to be done in coordination, and the goal is POMV 50-50, and we're all going to come together. We're all going to. Jesse Keel is the fourth vote in favor of doing it. Just you're killing the incentive to try to come up with you're burdening the incentive to try to come up with a solution to unimaginable levels, to unrealistic levels. But Jesse Keel voted for it, and it's just it is Bert's way of signaling that he's going to kill. He wants to impose things that are going to kill the PFD. The other thing about this, if you trend out, and they didn't discuss it in Senate Finance yesterday, but if you trend out where spending's going, you trend out where traditional revenues are going. POMV 2575, 7525 last 2 years, and then we're back into deficits again, and we've set up the procedure. I mean, none of this is talking about constitutional PFD. Even at 2575, we're back into where the revenue is going to come from, and we're going to be back into maybe it ought to be POMV 2080, or maybe it ought to be POMV 1585, or
just 100, right? It's just 100%. We're going to all take it to government, and it'll be fine. But again, even if they took all of the PFD today, based on the spending trajectory and what's going on right now, we'll be back at this place in just 2 or 3 years.
Well, it lasts a little. All of the PFD gets us a little bit farther than 2 or 3 years, but the trajectory certainly is that the PFD goes away, or that we go back into deficits if they take all of the PFD. It's but Bert is. I mean, he's procedurally great, right? But he's using it for all these bad purpose, for all these obviously bad reasons. I mean, he's using all this trickery for obviously bad reasons. We need $1 billion to close it. So let's make him pay $1.3 billion to close it. And let's add $1 billion or $2 billion surplus on top of that. It's not a legitimate proposal. It's just a thinly disguised way of killing the PFD, while being able to sort of say, "Ooh, I gave you an out. If you don't want to
Right.
take the out,
I gave you the opportunity, you squandered it.
yeah."
Meanwhile, I'm the one that's in control of all this and knows whether or not we're going to spend money from the surplus or we're going to get 1.3 billion or all the other kind of stuff. I mean, again, we're talking about because Lyman Hoffman's proposal was $900 million. He says 1 point. So you got a 40% increase right off the top. And then he shortened it down instead of, 12 years or whatever it was. He wanted to make it even shorter than that and add the CBR amount on top of that.
It's like, oh gosh, they might do $1.3 billion. So let's just put something else on top of it to make sure that it's so crushing it can never happen. And Bert will say, "Yeah, well, let's see. I'm in charge of voting for those new revenues. I hope to be in charge of the committee that would allow or deny those new revenues to come through." We don't have people seriously trying to solve problems. We have people seriously trying to show everybody how sharp they are procedurally and how many games they can play along the way. I mean, that's sort of what we got. That's what makes this a tragicomedy, right? I mean, you sort of sit there and go, "Good God, man!"
Well, and they don't want to give up any of the behavior that they've had over the last 25 years. I mean, they just don't want to. They don't want to stop. They don't want to. Like a spending cap. I mean, that's why would the lunatics want nurses to have keys to the asylum when they're running the place? They don't want that. I mean, that's exactly what's happening now. They don't want to be restrained in any way. They want to continue business as usual. It's what we talk about, business as usual Republicans. This is exactly what they want. This is exactly where they want to go.
And as long as they can cut the PFD, you fund it by cutting the PFD. They keep their the trade groups and the lobbyists and the chambers of commerce fat, dumb, and happy. I mean, they're fine with it because they don't have to pay for it. Yeah, we want more teachers. Yeah, defined benefits. So that's a good idea. I mean, it's just it's trickery to come up with more revenue at the expense of middle and lower income Alaska families. Trickery to come up with more spending that the top 20% doesn't have to pay for. It just goes on and on and on.
So, we're coming down to the end here, Brad. What should we be watching out for? What we should be looking for? I mean, this bill obviously passed. Now we've got the budgets and everything else coming up. What should we be on the lookout for? What should we be looking forward to here?
Well, I think a couple of things. I mean, all eyes move to the Senate now, right? The House has done what they're going to do on the budget. So all eyes will focus on Senate and Senate Finance about, what they're going to do about the budget that the House has sent over. Eyes should focus on 107. I mean, 107 is ready to go to the floor. It passed out of Senate Finance as amended 4-3. So it's ready to go to the floor. And the Senate's going to hold it up as it's, we've got a solution. I think it will be divisive on the Senate floor. I think it may break the Senate majority. We may find fissures in the Senate majority when it comes up on the floor. But they've got when people say, "Well, we've got to come up with a solution, a fiscal plan," Senate's going to say, "We got a fiscal plan. It's 25-75 for now."
Right.
And with this huge kicker that you've got to put in to get back to POMV 50/50. So. So the things to watch for: what's Senate Finance going to do with the budget? What are they going to do with the operating budget that's come over from the House? What are they going to do with the capital budget? And what are they going to do with SB 107? The other place to watch is House Ways and Means. I mean, people now seem to be primed, ready for a fiscal plan. So all eyes ought to be on Ways and Means about what kind of fiscal plan they're going to come up with.
Ben Carpenter says fiscal plan will be forwarded to House Finance. Spending limit will be released tomorrow. Other components will follow. Ignorance is no longer a valid excuse, but a tactic. So they're about to drop all this stuff out of the House, which is good. Again, the wild card in all this is, what is the governor going to do?
The person we don't talk about.
The person who we don't talk about, has not talked to us. We haven't spoken to the governor in I think it's almost going on almost 2 years now. Wouldn't respond to my last request for no communications with Alaska. Great. Thanks, Governor. All right. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Thanks for coming on board. Thanks for staying late. We appreciate it.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Good to talk with you. Chris Story's up next. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, in the break, finishing things out. Apparently, people believe that if they screech loud enough, that their points are valid at this point. And no, Brad isn't being paid to be here. Brad's doing this of his own free will. Brad's retired. I mean, apparently, you must be making some good money, Brad. That's all I'm saying. Good money to push all this stuff.
I have no idea who's paying. I would have no idea who's paying me. The oil companies hate me.
Yeah.
I mean, I supported Brenna's proposed proposition and lost a bunch of friends in the oil industry.
Yeah, no, I know you burned some bridges. I remember having a discussion when we were all talking about that. You burned some bridges on that one, some big times, big ways. But that's okay. If you screech loud enough, apparently that's truth. That's what's going on today. So,
well, when you screech, at least target the $2 billion. I mean, at least be realistic as you screech. At least have the right number in mind as you screech.
Right, making it all work and making it all worthwhile. All right, Brad. Final thought. I'll let you go here. Give me your final word for.
Well, the best thing from this morning's program for me was the insert you put in from Ben that they're coming forward with the fiscal plan. I'm not a big fan of doing it piecemeal. I would hope that they package it up and put it in front of House Finance as one package, an understandable total package, because it's $2 billion. We've got to see. We need to understand how we're filling the $2 billion. And if you do it a piece at a time, I think that we're going to lose sight of what we're actually trying to do, and people are going to pick and choose. And anyway, I hope it's a package, but it's good news that the House Ways and Means is going to come forward with a plan, because that's certainly what we need. I mean, we can't continue passing things that have $600 million deficits, right. Nor should we continue passing things that push the burden mostly to middle and lower income Alaska, well, almost entirely to middle and lower income Alaska families through PFD cuts. We need a comprehensive package that does all those things. So. Good news from Ben. I'll be looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, I think we're all looking forward to it at this point. All right. Well, thanks, Brad. I appreciate it. Thank you for coming on board and joining us today. We look forward to talking to you again next week.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
No problem, my friend. It's always good. I mean, it's all that pay that I'm looking for. It's all that checks in the mail. Thanks, Brad. Appreciate it.
Take care, Michael.
All right, Brad Keithley, our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Let's go back over here. Let's get Chris Story on the line here, shall we? Get him all squared away this morning. And hey, look at that. It actually worked this morning. Good deal.
Good morning, Michael.
Hello, my friend. What's happening? What be the haps, sir? What's going on?
You are so hip.
I am so hip.
So hip.
I am the proto hipster. That's what they call me these days. The proto hipster. Chris Story, our guest this morning. What's our topic for today, brother? What are we going to be discussing?
In an instant.
In an instant.
In an instant.
Okay. All right. Well,
And I know first thing you spend a lot of time on Instagram, but that's not really what this is about, Michael. So if you can shelve your social media,
that's not what I was thinking, but I was thinking Doc does make a pill for that, so you could probably fix that right up. All right.
Oh man.
Oh, that one's gonna leave a mark. That's gonna leave a mark. All right.
Oh.
All right, my friend, hold the line. We're jumping back into it. We're about 28 seconds out from rejoining Chris Story, our guest, the man from Homer. He's going to come in and help us with this. Kevin's got the quote of the day. The Herald Free platform. We call that YouTube, by the way. You could just go over there. You don't have to deal with any of it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
The show. Not your daddy. Nope. But I call him that occasionally. Chris Story joins us on the air. He is the daddy of PMA. Hey, what's happening, my friend? What's going on?
I'm just questioning my friends. So I think it's time to reevaluate the circle of people I have in my life. This is what I'm thinking about.
I think I've shattered the circle of trust.
That's right. Here's the circle. Here's Dukes.
I'm way on the outside. Circle's here. I'm like
earn your way back in. You can earn it. You can earn it back.
Oh man, Chris Story joins us every Tuesday to give us a little bit of a positivity, boost, and tell us a little life coaching. Today he wants to talk about in an instant. Like it's some kind of, I feel like Carl Sagan is like in an instant. So he's going to hit us with that this morning. All right, Mr. Story, take it away. It's all you, baby. What's going on?
I just think it would be an amazing feat if you could do the entire broadcast in that voice. That would be
in an instant. Chris Story, I have a question for you. In an instant, how do you fix that?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I just had this idea. If you ever feel like having sort of a psychic break, which you do pretty often actually, so I don't know what I'm saying, but if you ever really want to take it to the next level, a whole nother level of that psychic break, come to air as an alternate personality with a whole new voice and be a guest host from a perspective of somebody from San Francisco, say, under a bridge in San Francisco, something like that. I think you could pull it off. And anybody in radio today, only Michael Dukes could probably pull that off. You or Phil Henry.
I was just going to say Phil Henry. Yeah, I was just like flipping back and forth between the two. And it's not a psychic break; it's a psychotic break. I just wanted to point that out to you.
That's right. Dionne Warwick was the psychic hotline. That was
right. You don't need the psychic break. I can read your mind, Chris. I can see you, filthy man. All right. So in an instant, give me the what are you talking about?
Well, I'm reading this great book, and I highly recommend it if you've not heard of him. His name is Arthur Brooks, and he's a happiness professor at Harvard. Happiness professor, which is actually more meaningful than it sounds. But he's got a book out called From Strength to Strength, Finding Success, Happiness, and Deep Purpose in the Second Half of Life. And maybe that's because I'm headed into my second half of life, like you, Michael, and been thinking about that a little bit. And I love his book. It's really caused some stirrings in my mind and thinking about what he calls that second curve of life and how you evaluate, like, wait a minute, what really brings meaning and purpose into my life? What do I really covet when it comes to this second half? What do I want it to look like? What do you want to do, accomplish? Who do you want to become? And my point of saying in an instant is your entire life can change in the moment, in the instant you determine to make the decision. And once you decide that this is what you want, versus maybe where you've been going for the first 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. These next number of years, you're going to go this direction, and you consciously choose it, and you make it something that is on purpose and pointedly unique to you. And in that instant, everything changes. Tony Robbins used to talk about, oh, you can gain popularity, you can gain infamy in an instant with the point of a gun. I mean, you could do that. So that we all know you can change your life instantly with a bad decision, but you could do so with a good decision or the right decision for you. But I think just so often maybe we're continuing with inertia and just moving towards it's sort of a manifest destiny that we don't feel we have control over. But the point is, you do, and you can change it in this instant right now.
With a decision, deciding
Yes.
to analyze yourself, deciding on a new chief, definite aim, in deciding on, many things. I mean, many people's lives have turned on a single decision. I can't remember who it is. They talked about this as that being that magic moment, the magic moment that you made some kind of monumental decision that changed the course of your whole life. And most people think, oh, that's just the stuff of stories. That's just the stuff of this. That's just the stuff of that. I mean, I could testify to the fact that when I made a decision early on to come back to radio, because I'd been in radio when I was much younger, and then I was in radio doing certain things, and then I made that decision to go on the air, to go back on the air. That changed the course of my life. So I understand that instant magic moment that, where the decision that you go could change the complete and total course of your life.
Exactly. Even though it may take months, years to achieve or to get to a waypoint that you set out there for yourself, it's that you become somebody different the instant you make that decision in that moment. And then I would say, the one warning or a little caveat here would be careful, be very careful before you actually make the decision that you know why it's something you want. And because that gap between where you are and where you say you want to be or where you say you want to go, even if you only say it to yourself, in that gap can be a lot of trauma and a lot of disappointment and a lot of pain if you're not actually moving towards it because you really care. But I don't care that much about it, but I said I did, so I got to keep moving. And that comes back around to that word inertia. Sometimes we're just continuing to move towards something because, well, it's what we said a long time ago, or I made a decision and I got to stick with it. You can redecide, you can redefine, you can take aim again and move towards something different, especially if you are in that second curve of life. Maybe what you wanted in the first 30, 40, 50 years is maybe you've done it. And now it's time to reorient, recalibrate.
There's a problem in that for many people. I mean, it's a challenge. I guess it's let's recategorize that. It's a challenge. Is that, if you've reached the, 40th year of your life, your middle age or whatever, I mean, you've created a momentum to go in one direction. And sometimes it's hard mentally to be able to change that direction. Where you're heading in that. So what is, as an elderly man, what do you tell us to try and overcome that momentum? If your life is heading in one direction that maybe is not, maybe you could see the rocks and the shoals and it's not going to be good, or it's not going to be as fulfilling as you want it to be. What do you recommend to be able to change that momentum, that course of direction, to make that one single decision? Is it the decision itself? Because sometimes I think people get so scared of the unknown. I've been doing this way for so long, I don't even know, they can't even picture it. What's your suggestion?
I think being aware that the most clear and present danger in your life is dishonesty with yourself and deluding your own mind or to deceive yourself and just continue to ignore something that in the back of your mind, and that still quiet voice is speaking to you, and you know what it's saying, but you ignore it or you cover it up and you're dishonest with yourself. I think that's where the real pain, the real gulf and the gap of dissatisfaction of life really lives. And that's the shadow that we can cast light on by simply being honest with ourselves and figuring maybe it's why matters more than what. So in life, why you do something, why you are who you are matters more than what you are in this moment relative to your work or your station in life. Why? And then really delving deep into why it is you wish to do something different or aim towards something new. And then asking the third W question, which is who? Who do you want to serve in life? Who do you want? Who do you want in your life? You saw me cut you out really quickly here this morning already. A couple of
Right.
off-air comments, now one
Yeah,
on air.
I
You're
know.
cut out, pal. Who do you want in your life, in that circle, that close proximity that will influence who you become? Who are you going to allow in? And then I guess lastly would be, who do you want to be? Who do you want to become? And if you know why, then knowing who is a lot easier, in which case then living in Whoville will become more satisfying. I absolutely love, like, I'm going to go on air today at 1 o'clock on my show on Top of the World. And I literally love that. And absolutely come with a 210% of myself to that microphone and feel I know who I'm serving. I know who I want to be. And I know who you are listening and why I'm here to serve you and what I can bring to you. And that, to me, if I get 1,000 downloads on the podcast later, 10,000 people listening live, I'm actually just serving one person in a moment, just like you are. You and I both know that's the beauty of broadcast. You're broadcasting to many, but you're really only talking to one person at a time. And to me, when I realized that and I made that decision to only ever talk to one person at a time in that capacity, it changed everything. So why I show up to serve is I feel called to do it. I can't exactly put my finger on why, but it's a calling and I've answered it and I love it. And so it's who I want to serve, who I allow in my life, and who I want to become in the process.
And that was a change that you made later in life, right? I mean, that was not
Yes.
that
Yep.
was not something you did, and you know, your first 30 years in life were definitely not in that direction. And then all of a sudden, you made a
Correct.
change.
Yeah, absolutely. And numerous pivot points. Everyone has pivoted, no doubt. Very few people are on the same trajectory or at the same spot they were 10, 20, 15 years ago. We're always growing and pivoting. And I guess it's just a matter of a level of consciousness. And I'm just proposing that if you want change, be it in your health, your wealth, your prosperity, who you are, who you're becoming, who you have in your life, the negativity that you might be surrounded with, or your focus, your myopic focus on what's wrong with the world, you want to change, you can do it in an instant simply by deciding, cutting off all other routes or options. And it might take a year, 2 or 10, but if you decide, you've already changed in that instant. You've become somebody new by having made that decision.
So in an instant, again, the theme for today's discussion, walk me through, I guess, walk me through it again. Talk to me like I'm 5. Walk me through that day when you sit up and you make that decision. I mean, what in your mind, what does it look like for the average person? They just, they're fed up, or they are despondent, or they're feeling like not fulfilled. Walk me through it.
I'll tell you a story because I'd rather, share a story. I think it's more impactful than just citing factoids or bullet points. So the story I will tell you is this: the instant I became a runner was when, and it took me a year to achieve that, but at the instant I became a runner was the moment an older gentleman was sharing with me his health maladies and all of the things that come with aging and the health maladies that have come with the aging process for him. And he looked at me and said, "Don't worry, you'll be here soon enough." And I thought, in that instant, I can tell you the exact day where I was sitting, everything, and instantly I changed. Now, again, it took me a year to actually get to that point to then become, quote, a runner. But that was the decision I made. I said, I have to change now because I can see the trajectory. He was right. He wasn't wrong. He was 100% right where I was headed. And I said, I'm going to make a change in that instant. And I've stuck with it for 3 years. And as a result of that, many things have changed in my life. And you know what else changed, Michael? Not just my health, but I believe in myself much, much more because that many decisions, you and I have made many decisions in our lives that have affected the outcome of what we've done and who we've become. But I believe the more credibility you earn with yourself, the further you can go down other paths that you may not have even considered before because maybe you don't trust yourself. You violated that trust too many times such that you don't believe you anymore. And that dishonesty then and the delusion is sort of the swirl around your mind when you go to think about something. Nah, I probably won't follow through. I won't even make the decision. But once you trust yourself, then you're more apt to make the decisions that are right for who you are and who you want to become, whether it's this first or second or third curve or phase of life.
In an instant, you can make a decision. That's the thing. In an instant, you can change your life. All it takes is a little bit of self-analysis and a single decision. That's what it's all about. Chris Story, the man. Go ahead.
Okay. I got one beautiful, quick little story. Tiffany and I, years and years ago, were sitting on our deck overlooking the beautiful Kachemak Bay. It was a gorgeous sunny day. We had just finished some goal setting, and we said, hold on a second. What if we did this? And we wrote it down, and we said, yes, let's invest in this. And we signed our names to it and said, yes, this is what we'll do. And I looked at Tiffany, and we both looked at each other, and I said, we just made $200,000 right here, just in this instant. Of course, it would take 2 or 3 years to accomplish that thing, that investment took years, but in that second, we knew it. And so anyway, that's my last story, Michael. I know this is your show.
Yeah, it's good to go. I know it's hard to believe, right? Hard to believe.
Yeah.
Chris Story.
Hey, you'll be back with more here on the Michael Duke Show. Don't forget, every Tuesday at 7:24, your life can change in an instant.
That's right. Your life could change in an instant. Chris Story, author of the book The Backyard Millionaire, author of the book also The Watchman, the latest in the Jacob Mann series, which I've got a copy of, and I've started to read, and it's pretty damn good. That's all I could say right now. It's pretty. I'm not through. I'm looking at the twists and turns, but I'm looking forward to it. Chris Story, ilovehomeralaska.com. My friend, thank you for coming on board and being part of it with us today. We appreciate it.
It was my instant pleasure.
And it was instantly. It's always, whenever you're with me, it's instantly a pleasure. All right. Back with more. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common Sense Radio.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes,
allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Chris Story, our guest, still here on the program. Some good stuff, my friend. It's always good stuff. I don't know if anybody in the chat room is benefiting from it because they're still going on about trains and other stuff and sustainability, and which is all fine. Don't get me wrong. I just, I got something from what you said, and that's all that matters. I did this for me, not for anybody else.
One person.
I'm selfish like
one
that.
Person.
Yeah. I'm the one person you were talking to today.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it's interesting because I have, especially when it comes to talk radio, it's I think it's important in music radio as well, but when you're in talk radio, there is a point when you're like, I've got to, you're talking to just one person, and a consultant probably told me that at one point, said, make sure you just talk to one person. And I'm like, but I always do. That's kind of how I always did. It was kind of like a little, people say, well, what's the format of your show? You ask somebody to come on the program who's never been on before. They say, well, how's this going to work? What are the questions you're going to, and I'm like, I have no idea what questions I'm going to ask you. I said, we're going to talk about this, this, and this, but just think of it as a cup of coffee. We're just going to sit down and have a cup of coffee together and have a conversation. Oh, okay. It's how I've always pictured this show in the long run. But it's always that one-on-one kind of stuff that it's what I enjoy the most.
Well, you honed your craft, Michael. You honed your craft. I forgot to mention. I was going to mention. I've got some breaking news today from Homer Electric. Brad Janorski, the general manager, is going to be on my show. Breaking news. Nobody knows about this in all of Alaska. This is breaking on my program today.
Okay.
So, anyone in the chat room can be aware of that. So pretty exciting.
Nope. So what's the news? I mean, tell us what's the.
I can't tell you.
Oh.
He's gonna break it on my show.
Okay. All right. Fine. 1 o'clock today.
If I break it here, then yeah. And by the way, I don't even know.
But we're not on the air,
So
so
we'll
it's
find
all
out.
good. It's all good.
It's just you.
Yeah.
You and Harold.
Just me and Harold are the only two here left for the day right now. All right, my friend. Well, I guess I don't have anything else for you other than I am in the middle of reading The Watchmen. I'm trying to do my read through before I start to narrate it.
That's interesting. I wondered if you did that. I never asked you before. So you don't just sit down and read it cold, because I was thinking, how would you know, like, the character voice? Do you kind of develop that up front?
I have read,
kind of figure out the character?
I have done a few reads kind of cold, but to test it out. But I found it not to be great for a couple reasons. One, you'll start off with a character voice and you'd be like, okay, here's the character voice. And then you get 2/3 of the way through the book and the author will say, and his slight Texas drawl does, and I'm like, oh God, wait a minute. This guy is supposed to have had a slight Texas drawl the entire book, and I've just read 2/3 of it.
Right.
And he's a supporting character that appears every other page. I mean, like, oh my God. So you got to kind of read through it. And it just kind of gives me a feel for the whole tone of everything so that I know kind of how to perform it. How to perform it better so that I know when there should be tension coming up. If the author hasn't kind of forecast or foreshadowed that there's tension coming up, that you kind of know what's happening, what's going to happen next. So kind of how to play it a little better. So yeah, you need to read through the book. I've done a few short ones where I was like, I'll just read this cold. And then I went back and re-recorded them because I wasn't happy with the way that they sounded. So it's, it's a process. But I definitely, with your book, I just wanted to read it for enjoyment first, also for research, but to enjoyment, just to know what's going on.
Well, cool. Well, I can't wait to hear it. It's going to be my brother. Like I say, the greatest compliment is he goes, Michael Dukes, because he's read The Backyard Millionaire and The Making of Man only through Audible, and so all he knows of my writing really is from you. And so he's like, well, Michael Dukes does a great job. I'm like, what about me?
What about me? I wrote it. He's just the mouthpiece. Right. What the hell? No, but it should be good. I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to performing it. But it really it's a good story so far. I'm enjoying it, and the peeks into the old adopted hometown are kind of cool too. So I really like that. So,
which I am concerned. I'm not concerned. I don't care. I know there's going to be some people that go, that's not really how Homer is. Doesn't matter. It's my fictional version.
It's fiction.
Of Homer.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, he's not Louis L'Amour, who's got every detail of everything down to the gnat's ass. I mean, just come on. It just doesn't make any sense. Anyway,
nobody lives at the top of the Salty Dog.
I know.
I put a guy there.
Yeah. Well, it's a pretty small little joint up there. When I first read that, I was like, I've seen the Salty Dog. That's like a 112 square foot apartment up there. That's not a big place. So it is. It's good
stuff. All Jacob needs is a bed.
Yeah.
All right, catch you later.
All right. See you later, my friend. Thanks for coming on board. Chris Story, our guest here on the Michael Duke Show. Okay. I guess I don't even know what I want to talk about. What do I want to talk about? No idea. So I suppose we could just launch the phone lines if you guys want to talk about. You guys are talking about railroads and things like that, sustainability. Here we go. Okay. Welcome back to the program, The Michael Duke Show. We continue one final segment for today. I mean, I don't know why, but I just have the feeling that whole segment with Chris was just for me. Because half the chat room's over there talking about other important stuff. Don't get me wrong. Important stuff, sustainability, fresh food, the railroad, all that kind of, whether or not we're going to get a rail line to Canada and everything. I mean, those are, don't get me wrong, all important things. But, so I don't know. I guess what I'll do is I'm going to throw the phone lines open. How about that? I'll put the phone lines up and we'll start there. We'll see what you guys have to say. 907-433-3150, 907-433-3150 will be the phone number if you'd like to call in. Special thanks to our friends at Satellite West for helping to sponsor the program. As always, from Minchumina to Metlakatla, from Chicken to Chena, from Tetlanika to the Tanana, wherever you are in the state of Alaska, Satellite West has got you covered with connectivity, meaning you can send text messages, you can send emails, you can surf the internet, you can make phone calls, no matter where you are. That's what Satellite West specializes in, and they're proud sponsors of the program today and every day here on the thing. And if you're looking for a local dealer, whether it's Marine Supply down in Homer or Arctic Fire and Safety in Fairbanks, they got a whole list of dealers over on their website at satellitewest.com. So special thank you to them for sponsoring the program today. All right. Well, I don't know. What do I want to chit chat about? I suppose we could come back to, there was a discussion going on about fresh food and sustainability. And I know I've been promising Jerica in the chat room that we're going to talk more about sustainability here in the near future. I got to be honest with you. I just watched a video the other day, and I was talking to my wife about this because my wife she's got kind of a quasi-green thumb. She likes to do a little planting and seeds in the spring and herbs and things like that. And when we lived in Fairbanks, we had we did a what did they call it now? Square foot gardening. I'm sorry. That's what it was called. Basically raised boxes, right? I built 4x4 foot boxes with a foot tall sides. And we raised plants and mostly vegetables and things like that in the summer. It was a fun time. It was a great thing to be able to do. I had, I think, six or eight of these big raised boxes. They're done on sawhorses. You put them up off the ground because the ground is cold. And you want to be able to get them as warm as possible and get the sunlight. And so we always had it up against the building, so you got the reflection and, good drainage and everything else. And we had a great time. Every summer we had lots of fresh vegetables to choose from, lots of greens. The greens obviously were one of the best things that came out of that. We did some tomatoes, we did zucchinis and did things like that. So I've always had an interest in that. Well, I came across a video the other day, and maybe we'll get these folks on the program to discuss it because I think it is, I think it's interesting, and I think it is something that we could all do, whether in our garages or basements or wherever. I saw a video from a company called Eden, and I can't remember if that's the full name of their company or not, but Eden. And they work in conjunction with NASA on with NASA and other agencies on sustainable food programs for space, for space exploration and things like that. And they've created a aeroponic system that would allow you to grow plants in your garage, your basement, your family room, wherever, on these little racks, these little rolling caster racks. And it was the coolest thing to watch. And they had some time-lapse stuff where, you plant, you put all the seeds in these little pods, and they're aeroponics means no dirt at all. And it's not submerged in water. It's spritzed in water over a period of time. They've got these bags underneath of them, and it sprays the water and does everything else. And in like 5 weeks, they were starting to harvest like greens, like, arugula and lettuce and Swiss chard and stuff like that. And I just thought that was the coolest thing to be able to do it, especially, here in Alaska, because I'll be honest with you, I came down from Fairbanks thinking I'm going to come down to Anchorage and we're going to get even fresher produce, because that was always the complaint in Fairbanks, is that the produce wasn't fresh enough. And then we got down here and we realized, oh, well, Fairbanks is actually a stop on the highway on the way to Anchorage, so the produce in Fairbanks is actually fresher than the produce in Anchorage. Because, man, I bought something and like the next day it was rotted on the counter. I'm like, what the actual, So, yeah, so I would like to talk about that. Hydroponics, aeroponics, home gardening. If you want to build yourself a little, I love a green salad, and we were making a lot of our own stuff. And this looks like kind of a cool way to do it. So I owe Jerica that. We'll talk a little bit about that maybe here in the near future. But I just wanted to share this video that I saw that was super cool. Let's go over to the phones and see what you guys have to say. 907-433-3150, 907-433-3150. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Mike. This is Jason calling from Fairbanks.
Hello, Jason. How are you, my friend?
I heard you found out all about aeroponics. I was wondering if you could, at your convenience, no, not right now, email me the link to that video. I'd like to see that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'll shoot you over a link to the video on the website and everything else. It's kind of a cool thing. I mean, that's we know that's what's going to happen in the future, especially in cold climates. And I know you've sent me information on how they could do the indoor gardening all year round here in Alaska. I think it would be a good opportunity. So yeah, no, I'll see if I can send that over to you.
I think so too.
All right.
Yeah, and I have some information for you too. You were talking about the raised plants, how you grow them on the racks. I know the folks out at the Poker Flat Research Range, the Rocket Range north of Fairbanks, and what the range manager does, because she grows tomatoes at home, is what they're called cider rockets. They're Army surplus. They're the ones they fire from helicopters now, and they come in these wooden boxes, and they've been stored in there so long. The propellant is nitroglycerin and nitrocellulose, and plants love nitrates. And what she would do is, like you said, she'd put them on the ground in the sun, and she would use those boxes because the nitrates had gotten into the wood, and her tomato plants are growing like crazy. And you can also do that with old nitrate film stock, or even any kind of nitrate fertilizer. And also, if it's kind of one of those summers where it's or springs where it's kind of chilly, if you spray painted the boxes black to absorb sunlight, to make sure the soil's good and warm, those are two easy ways to give them a head start. Any kind of plant you're growing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we raised them up off the ground, to get rid of the seepage of the cold from the ground, and we did have them painted a dark color so that they would absorb that. That's a good call. Thanks, Jason. I got time for one more quick call if we're quick. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
That is Rob calling from the Kenai Peninsula.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just calling in reference to ways we could probably get some money back from these oil industries. Not aware if you know that Hillcorp owns not only that company, they own half of the OMSI, which is the boat company that provides all the cargo back and forth to the platforms. They also own half of the heliport, which provides all of that flying back and forth, and they use all that as tax shells, write-offs. And yeah, we should be hitting them harder on taxes, and we wouldn't have to worry about our PFDs and losing all that stuff if they paid more money. You know what I mean?
Well, I appreciate that. I don't think it would reach the $2 billion mark that Brad talked about, but appreciate it. Out of time, folks. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day. All right. Well, that's it, my friends. That is it. I appreciate you guys coming on board. Thank you for being part of it. We will see you next week, or tomorrow. Next week. We'll see you next week. I'm taking the rest of the week off. I'll see you tomorrow. Any final thoughts here? I guess that's about it. Most produce comes up the Alcan, not the barge. Yeah, no, that's what I said. I discovered that That's what was shocking to me. I thought I was going to get great produce in the Wasilla anchorage area because I thought it came up over the barge, and then I realized later on, nope. The best produce is in Fairbanks, surprisingly enough. All right, thanks for coming in, my friends. We will see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.